What's up YouTube, Capital G here, checking out the first reveal cards from the upcoming Dimension Force Core Booster set. Much to my dismay, and I would assume much to Triff's delight, Pendulum Monsters are finally coming back to Yu-Gi-Oh! I know a lot of Pendulum fans out there have been waiting, and I'm sure you guys probably feel a certain type of way because let's be honest, there really hasn't been any Pendulum support worth talking about since the start of the Sevens era as a whole, and it looks like Konami is finally giving you guys some support, and yeah, this is kind of crazy. I mean, you can see it right there on your screen. Ritual Pendulum Monsters are now a thing. I mean, it took my brain a few seconds to try to comprehend this. I was like, Ritual Pen, like, we can't do that, can we? But apparently Konami is like, yeah, we can do that, and we're going to do that. Obviously, the artwork tells us that this is an Odd Eyes monster, so there will be a focus on Yuya. It's the cover card. This is Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon, and this is where we're going to start when it comes to these new Yuya cards. This is a level 7 Light Dragon Ritual monster. 2700 attack and 2500 defense, so a little better stats than the original Odd Eyes, I believe. Actually, was he 25 or was he 3000? I think he was 25. Anyways, you got a pin scale of 4, and your pendulum effect is a hard once per turn. It says, during the end phase, you can add one ritual spell from your deck or graveyard to your hand, then return this card to the hand. You've got a bunch of monster effects on this card, starting with the fact that this card can be ritual summoned with Odd Eyes Advent. That's the old Odd Eyes ritual spell, probably from like Docs or something like that. It must be pendulum summoned from the hand or ritual summoned. That's the way you get this card on the field. Now, your first real monster effect is each time your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, inflict 300 damage to them. Second effect, once per turn, if your opponent activates a spell card or a spell effect, quick effect, you can place this card in your pendulum zone, and if you do, negate the opponent's effect. Then if this card was ritual summoned before being placed in the pin zone, you can special summon one Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck. Okay, so this guy is loaded with effects, and one of the things that I found to be very peculiar about this card is the fact that it's a ritual monster, but you don't actually have to ritual summon this card to get it on the field. Hell, you don't even need to run ritual spells at all. You can obviously just pendulum summon it from your hand as you would any other high level monster. And I'm wondering, is that going to be exclusive to this card, or is that just how, you know, ritual pendulum monsters are going to work moving forward? Because there's a part of me that thinks Konami's just kind of making this up as they go along. You know, we have never seen a monster like this. Anyways, when you do get this card on the field, which is obviously going to be fairly easy to do, you do get a spell negation, which is solid. I've said it a lot of times on this channel. In 2021 or 2022, when we'll get this card in TCG, negation is the name of the game. So just having an instant spell negate is obviously very solid. It does come at the cost of itself because, you know, you lose this guy as a body on board, although it does go to your pendulum zone. Maybe you can use it from there. If you run the ritual spell card in your deck, then obviously you can just bounce it to your hand and get a ritual spell as a +1, and then you can maybe pendulum summon it in following turns, which would be very nice. I think this card could possibly be worth you know, ritual summoning. Odd Eyes Advent is not that bad of a card. I think it's actually pretty decent. It's more so tailored to going second because to get the full bonus value out of it, your opponent has to have a couple more monsters on field than you. But if you do get this card on field as it, you know, as ritual summoned, you get not only a spell negation, but then after that, you get to cheat out an Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck. We all know that you're probably going to go for Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon because that dude, if my memory serves me, not only has a bounce effect, but in addition, he has full Omni negation for monster effects, spells, and traps. So that card's just a boss. And thinking about getting 2 negations and possibly a bounce out of 1 card, that seems pretty insane to me. So that definitely can be worth it. The burn damage from the first monster effect, that's like whatever. And I don't really think anyone's playing this card because of that. We have a spell card called Extra Pendulum, which, I mean, the name makes it a little self-explanatory. It's a normal spell that is always treated as a pendulum card. And the first effect, well, only effect of this card says, you can conduct 1 pendulum summon of a monster or monsters from your extra deck during your main phase this turn, in addition to your pendulum summon. You can only gain this effect once per turn. This is not a hard once per turn though. So if your opponent actually were to like negate this card with, I don't know, maybe like a hot red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, you can activate a second copy of this card and still get that second Pendulum summon. Now, this is a card that, and I don't claim to be like a Pendulum expert, so someone like Triff is really going to have to dive deep into this and do some testing and whatnot. But this seems like a card, just on face value, that could be incredibly broken or completely unnecessary. I guess it kind of depends on also what Pendulum archetypes you're playing this in. Are you playing it in, like Endymion or something like DDD? Like, I think DDD could probably definitely use something like this. Or the first card that actually popped into my mind was something like Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. Because if I was playing Pendulums and maybe I Pendulum summon, 4 monsters from my hand, I would have no problem turning all those monsters into an Appaloosa and then simply activating this card and Pendulum summoning all those dudes back, because Appaloosa has 3 zones that point down. You get a bunch of negation from her, and then I get to just use those monsters again to continue on with my combo. So this definitely feels like a card that has an incredibly high ceiling, but it could also be a card that's just not needed. Again, I think it's going to depend on what Pendulum archetype specifically you're playing, and also what do you want to do with your Pendulum monsters. Are you trying to really go into your extra deck ASAP? We've got a trap card. This is Pendulum Scale, normal trap with a hard once per turn. If you have 2 cards in your Pendulum zones, apply one of these effects depending on the difference between those cards' current Pendulum scales. So if it's 0, which I would assume means that you have 2 Pendulum monsters with the same exact scale, you can destroy 2 spell or trap cards on the field. That could, I guess, even include the Pendulum scales themselves. 1 to 3, you can add 1 level 2, 3, or 4 Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. If it's 4 to 6, you can add 1 level 5, 6, or 7 Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. And then if it's 7 plus, which would have to be really hard to do, you'd have to use like those Zark cards with the 0 scales and stuff like that. You can return 2 cards from your Pendulum zones to your hand. Then you can special summon 1 Pendulum monster from your hand. Okay, so while I am not any type of Pendulum expert, everything I know about Pendulums and what I've seen, they don't really play trap cards pretty much at all. They just usually use their monsters as their defensive cards, like a lot of decks do. You summon things like Vortex and, the Mighty Master and Endymion and all that stuff to essentially just negate all your opponent's cards and not really rely on traps. The one trap that they did use was, I believe, Time Pendulum Graph, and that card was actually nuts. That card was insane. I think that card could still be useful today, especially when you combine it with the Time Star Magician. It's just incredibly solid as a form of removal, but that is also a continuous trap card. So I don't really see Pendulums playing traps unless they're going to be like insanely powerful ones. Anyways, we have our last 2 main deck Pendulum monsters, and the names of these cards are based off of Yuya's like catchphrase from the Yu-Gi-Oh! RV anime. So if you've ever seen that, where he says, "Ladies and gentlemen." We've got the first one. This is Performapal Lady Ange. She's level 3, Light Fairy. 1000 attack, 1500 defense. She's got a pen scale of 1, and her Pendulum effect says once per turn, when an attack is declared involving both players' monsters, you can discard 1 Pendulum monster. Your opponent's battling monster loses 1000 attack for the rest of the turn. Her monster effects are, and you only get to pick 1 of these effects, so you got to choose which one you want to use. The first effect says you can discard this card and 1 other Performapal monster, except another copy of herself, draw 2 cards. The other effect is if this card is in the graveyard and you control an Odd Eyes, or the next card we're going to talk about, the Gentle Trude, you can place this card in your pin zone. So I think that monster effect, the Destiny Draw effect, or I guess I should say Dark Lord Ishel effect, that's kind of nuts to me, man. Like, I think Pendulum's potentially getting even faster, and I guess even having ways to draw that are, not spell-based, like, that's incredible. Pendulum players just, they burn through their decks, and this card just gives them even more speed. I mean, it's a very powerful effect. And then obviously she's in the graveyard, you summon an Odd Eyes in, and the following turns you could just like add her or put her back in your Pendulum zone. And she's got a good scale too. So I guess her Pendulum effect is just a nice little utility effect. The final card is the one that she directly works with. This is Performapal Gentrude, level 4, Dark Fiend, 1500, 1000, pin scale of 8, so they got the wide scales. It's unfortunate that they're not the same level, but whatever. Pinned effect is if you control no monsters or all monsters you control are pin monsters, and you have Lady Ange in your Pendulum zone, you can add one Odd Eyes card from your deck to your hand. Monster effect, and again, it's like Thunder Dragon cards. You get to pick one of the effects, not both. If this card is destroyed, you can place one Performapal Power Pendulum monster from your deck in your Pendulum zone, except another Gentrude. Second effect, if this this card is face up in your extra deck, you can discard a Pendulum monster, add this card to your hand, and then you get to return one Performapal or Odd Eyes card from your Pendulum zone to your hand. So I guess it kind of resets your scales. I'm not sure why it bounces, but whatever. I think the first effect is pretty solid. Basically, if you get these two specific monsters in your Pendulum scales, then you can essentially search the cover card for free, or you can even add like an Odd Eyes Advent. It's just a quick way to, get that rolling. If nothing else, just Pendulum summon the Odd Eyes and get that spell negation effect, which is kind of nice. And then the monster effect, basically, if the card is destroyed on field, you can just put another Performapal in your scale. So at least it makes grinding with Pendulums a little better, because I know sometimes if Pendulums, like if your scales get taken out, that's the easiest way to make Pendulum players like run out of gas, because if their monsters are gone and their scales are gone, they don't have anything to fall back on. At least this card replaces itself, and it can also add itself from the face-up extra deck back to the hand. So what do you guys think of these cards? I think they're really interesting. Like, I think that these cards are easy to use. You have some powerful cards like the Pendulum Ritual Monster. Also, double Pendulum summoning seems that seems like that could be kind of bonkers. So I want to see what else Konami has in store, and I want to see if we're going to get more Pendulum Ritual Monsters in this set. Anyways, whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, as always.